Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to The Only Podcast. My name is Chris Fanini, your host. I'm contributor to TheOnlyColors.com. I'm joined here this week by KJ and Jeremy Dewar. First off, how you guys doing this evening when we're recording this?
I am all right.
All right.
Doing well. Looking forward to another good weekend here. Couple big games to talk about this week.
Before we start, wanted to plug a couple things. If you're not, I assume you are since you're listening to this, but make sure you check out The Only Colors, TheOnlyColors.com for a lot of great, unique content. Just today, our friend Spartan Dan posted his latest Big Ten projections, which are always really, really good and valuable, and a lot of work goes into that, so check that out if you can. We've also been writing about hockey more, baseball, some other stuff, some smaller sports that maybe haven't been written about a ton in the past. Make sure you check that out. Follow TOC on Twitter at TheOnlyColors, and you can find everybody else's Twitter accounts from there. I'm at Chris Vanini, but we start this podcast off with what we've been doing for quite a while now, and that's basketball. And since the last podcast, it's only been one game. Spartans went to Illinois and came away with a 60-53 victory. I believe it was Illinois' second home loss of the year. I had picked the Spartans to lose that one. Joe Toohey, our managing editor, picked the Spartans to win. I was very impressed with MSU coming out of this game, and now the Spartans are sitting at 10-4 in the Big Ten with 4 games to go. The next one coming Thursday against Minnesota. But before we move on to what's next, we'll start off with this Illinois game. Very whistle-driven game. Tom Izzo called it, I think, one of the most physical games he'd ever seen. But there were how many fouls? 24 fouls on the Spartans, 22 on Illinois. It got kind of ugly at times, but surprisingly, no one really in that much, no individual players in that much foul trouble. But KJ, to start off with, what were kind of just your impressions of this game and how the Spartans looked?
Well, as you noted, it was not the most aesthetically pleasing game on the slate, but a road win's a road win, particularly when you can even the score against a team that beat us at home in a game that MSU fans felt like we should have gotten, if not for free throw shooting issues. The stats indicated that basically we won this game on the backs of the big three. Dawson, Valentine, and Trice put up 51 out of the team's 60 points. I thought they played probably better on offense than the numbers showed. Really, if you believe that three-point shooting's a little bit random, they only hit 3 out of 15 three-pointers. If they make 5 or 6 of those, then the offensive numbers look a lot better. It felt like in the second half, if they could just get one three-pointer to drop, they'd pull away. And they got that three-pointer from Valentine. They did pull away. Unfortunately, they allowed themselves to get reeled back in at the end. Yeah. But it's obviously a quality win.
Yeah, there was that stretch where it was like a 4. The lead was between 4 and 6 for like what felt like at least 10 minutes, and then MSU pulled away, like you said. But then they committed turnovers. They allowed some three-pointers. All of a sudden, Illinois was back in it. But Spartans, where they maybe lost the Illinois game at the free throw line, they went 17 for 20 in this one. Travis Trice 10 for 12 on his own. Denzel Valentine 6 for 6. So the big guys, the only big guy who got there was Dawson, who was 1 for 1. So I think they were able to stave off the Illini through the free throws, which is kind of what cost them in the previous game, which I thought was interesting. Jeremy, what kind of stuck out to you about this game?
Yeah, free throws was one of them. My thing coming away from it was it kind of seemed like a lot of the storylines that have been out there all year, MSU kind of answered those a little bit. Seeing them close out a game I know Illinois kind of made it close there at the end and actually had a chance to tie before some free throws after Nunn missed that three. So it's nice to see them close out a close game, especially on the road. And like you said right there, too, the free throws. So that was two big things to take away from it. And if you just look at the box score, I know I was looking at the box score again today to kind of refresh myself. It looks kind of like a sloppy game when three of your players end up with 51 out of 60 points. But it was kind of after, I'd say, about the first 5 to 10 minutes of the first half. Once MSU got the lead before half, it really felt like they were just going to pull away in the second half. But Illinois kind of always just had that ability to stay close and make it, so you couldn't be completely comfortable. But like you said last week on the podcast, going into it, probably most of us didn't think that was a for sure win, and coming out of it the way that it did was pretty good confidence to get the fourth in a row. And also nice to see that Izzo in the post game, instead of having to pump up his own team, was pumping up the Big Ten as a whole, meaning that he's probably thinking we're less on the bubble and more trying to move us up a seed, I guess, by pumping up the Big Ten. So I'll take that as a good sign, and move us to BubbleCon 5 like Dan did. So.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I saw a comment, a joke the other day that the Big Ten would get 7 teams in the tournament and 6 of them will be 10 seeds. It's almost like what the SEC has been in the past, but I think a little bit better. But although Maryland did beat Wisconsin tonight when we were recording this, so maybe the Big Ten's a little bit better or worse. I don't know. But MSU, by most accounts, is safely in at this point. They need to maybe avoid a disastrous loss or two to stay off that. Although I thought I saw, might have been ESPN or someone said somewhere that MSU still had work to do, which, as long as they take care of what they're supposed to, yeah, if they lose 4 games in a row, then, yeah, they're obviously in a bad spot. But the Illinois game, you mentioned that the offensive numbers, KJ. The defensive numbers were very good. The Illini only shot 28% from the floor. They went 2 for 16 at the 3-point line, so it was similar struggles as MSU. But they went 21 for 28 at the free throw line, so 21 of their 53 came at the line. Kind of illustrated how ugly of a game that was. But Illinois is a team right there on the bubble. It's a place MSU's always kind of struggled, which is why I picked against them. But they're at 4 wins in a row now, 6 out of 7, heading into this final stretch here with some difficult games. KJ, when you kind of look at where the Spartans are sitting now, 19-8, 10-4, your thoughts on how they've finished or how they've done the past few weeks here, and do you think they're kind of finding a stride?
Oh, I think absolutely they're finding a stride. I think longtime MSU fans know that Izzo teams tend to get better as the season goes on, and I have to confess that I probably didn't have enough faith this year that he had enough pieces in play to turn this into a legitimate, maybe arguably top 20 team the way they're playing right now. But it sure looks like it's all coming together. The defense has been much more consistent over the last few games. The offense is still, I still worry about end game situations, and you saw that at the end of the Illinois game where they start running clock and it gets down to under 10 seconds on the shot clock, and they still don't necessarily have a player that can manufacture offense in that situation, but they're getting better. Trice in particular, attacked the lane a lot more against both Michigan and Illinois.
Right, that came out of, not nowhere, but he's a guy who consistently would always get his shot blocked when he drove in, and last 2 he's been driving in like crazy and having a lot of success.
Right, if you look at the stats, the last 2 games combined, Trice has got 16 combined 2-point field goal attempts. He's only made 6 of those, but he's also gotten to the line 18 times and made 16 of them. So, that's kind of the big piece. that worried me at the beginning of the season. That still worries me a little bit, but you're starting to see flashes of Trice being the guy that can sort of make things happen on offense when nothing else is happening. Whether that's a function of playing off the bench or not, I think it's probably more a function of reduced playing time, if anything. It's
could be.
He hasn't played over 30 minutes in the last 5 games, so I think that's keeping him a little bit fresher. And he played at least 30 minutes in the previous 7 games. So,
and that's a credit also to Lou Rawls, Tum Tum, or Yum Yum, Nairn Jr. Played 34 minutes against Illinois, didn't score, missed all 3 of his shot attempts, but 4 rebounds. He had 2 really big defensive rebounds at the end, and 2 assists to 1 turnover. So Izzo, even if he's not scoring, still likes what he does. I did not like, you mentioned MSU running clock at the end. It seems like something they have kind of always done, and it's something I've always said is that you beat the press by attacking the press. And that's especially true for this year's team, which really still struggles in the half court, and they rely so much on getting out and running. I know it's late in the game, but when the team's pressing you, they're daring you to run. They're playing into your strength. And I didn't like that MSU was just trying to sit on it pretty much, and it almost cost them.
I completely agree.
Yeah. Jeremy, your thoughts on this 4-game stretch here? I know you picked them. We all picked them to beat Michigan, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we all picked them to beat Michigan and lose to Ohio State.
Lose to Ohio State. So obviously they've proven us wrong a little bit. Thoughts on where they're? You think they're hitting a stride?
Yeah, I definitely think it's the nice thing too is they haven't all been the same game. I mean, the Illinois game, I was surprised when I looked back to see the possessions, that it was up to 61 possessions. It just felt like a slower game than what they had done against Michigan and obviously Northwestern too, to begin the 4-game winning streak. So for me, I always like to see a variety of winning. They are doing it seems to be different ways. Some games it felt like Tum Tum was a big difference, whereas against Illinois, obviously didn't quite feel like it was him. And yeah, so it's nice to see them winning in different ways and doing the typical Izzo thing and right upon March, being to hit a stride. And I think I'll call myself out on thinking that this year it wasn't going to be the typical Izzo, hit the stride in March. I just didn't see it in this team, but they've really found a way here through a pretty tough stretch. I mean, Michigan, with all the injuries, is tough, but it's still tough to win on the road. And 2 road wins against Michigan and Illinois is definitely pretty good for the confidence. So definitely like the way that they're doing different ways, finding ways to win now.
Yeah, and MSU's up a game. I think it's a game and a half on Indiana. 2 games up on Ohio State, Iowa for the final double bye spot in the Big Ten tournament, which took me a while to figure out. Now that they've got Maryland and Rutgers in there, 4 teams get a double bye to the, I don't even know what round of the
quarterfinals, I guess.
Wisconsin's clearly in there. Maryland, with their win over Wisconsin tonight, puts them in a good spot. Purdue has very surprisingly done well this year. They're tied with MSU in the conference, although they do have to go to Breslin, and that's what makes these final 4 games so big. MSU, pretty safely in. If we assume they're in, the focus now is obviously on them trying to get that double bye. They've got Minnesota coming into Breslin on Thursday, which actually, before we get to that, Thursday is going to be Big Ten Network Appreciation Day.
Yeah, what does that
MSU
mean?
I don't know, but how? I got an email about it. Did not read it. Do I still have it? Where is it?
Do we all have to buy Mike Hall and Dave Repson a gift, or?
I know they're gonna be doing BTN live from MSU
It seems like the only place they should be holding BTN Appreciation Day would be Rutgers, because if BTN didn't exist, Rutgers would be like in, the MAC or something now.
Right, okay, here it is. BTN Live is 5 to 7 from the Breslin Center. It's kind of like their sports center. And Hollis basically wants to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Jim Delaney's vision to launch the conference network. Although it didn't start until 2007, so I assume 2005 was when 2005 is when the idea started. So it's sort of a 10-year anniversary, even though it's only been around for 8. Dave Revson will host it with a number of guests there. Izzo will be on, Matt Stagenga, D'Antonio, Connor Cook, Shalik Calhoun, and Kirk Cousins. You can watch it in person at 5 o'clock if you have tickets to the basketball game. So it looks like they'll open the doors about 2 hours before, a little bit beforehand. So yeah, you guys doing anything to celebrate BTN Appreciation Day? If they really wanted to do it at MSU, or if they really wanted to make MSU fans feel good about it, they could have aired their first ever broadcast football game, which was the Appalachian State-Michigan game. So
there you go.
That's
it was a good start for the conference. But
always appreciate it for that.
But we joke, but I think we're all grateful for the conference or the network. It's certainly made viewing games a lot easier than the old ESPN Plus channels you'd have to find on UPN or something like that. They do a good job. A lot of good people there, and it obviously brings in more money for the schools, which means more stuff for fans and players and all like. So I think it's a win-win.
And it got us Maryland and Rutgers, so
Yes.
It's the gift. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah,
and Penn State hockey, so.
Yeah, and Johns Hopkins lacrosse.
Yeah, that's the big one, though.
But I think it was a pretty revolutionary idea. Clearly, you've seen everybody else doing it now, so good for the Big Ten for starting that. And so.
If anything, it's been too successful, right?
Well, I guess that's a good problem to have for them. So so the Minnesota game after BTN Appreciation Day, Minnesota comes in at 16-12, losers of 3 in a row, including a bad one to Northwestern at home. So Gophers are reeling a bit. They're not looking like they're in the NCAA tournament picture after they had been 16-9, but some tough ones there. They come in pretty even offense, defense, in the top 80 in the country. About their terms of what they do well, they force a lot of turnovers and steals. That's pretty much what sticks out about them. Looking at their KenPom numbers here, Maurice Walker, senior, takes a lot of up at the possession. But KJ, looking at the Gophers here, looking at this game, what are going to be, you think, the keys? What's going to be the strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that the fact we only play them once and they're not exactly a team you scramble to the TV to watch. They've been pretty much completely off my radar.
I feel like I've barely seen anything about them either, and especially we're in late February and MSU hasn't played them, nor Purdue, nor Wisconsin yet. It's been a strange scheduling year. I can't tell you the last Nebraska game I saw on TV. You know what it was? It was the Purdue. It was probably their game at Purdue, and Purdue won a close game. That's probably the last, on February 7th. That's probably the last time I saw Minnesota play on TV. Been a non-eventful year for them.
Right. So the numbers say exactly what you just said. If you look at their ranks in conference play, the only major 4-factor category they rank above number 7 is defensive turnover percentage, where they're first in the conference. So they're creating more turnovers on defense than anybody else. But that's really about it. On paper, it's a team with good size. They got 5, 6 guys getting playing time that are 6'9" or bigger, but that doesn't seem to be translating into much because they're not a force on the boards. They're not blocking a lot of shots.
Right. They're 12th in effective height, and you look at the games that MSU's guards have struggled against, it's against those big guards. But then you look at, Andre Hollins is only 6'2", Nate Mason is 6'1", DeAndre Matthews 5'9". So their height is not necessarily in their guards, so to speak. At least that, and but turnovers will have to be the equalizer. And MSU's generally been pretty good this year. Up until late in that Illinois game, they had taken care of the ball really well in that game, despite struggling on offense. But turnovers will have to be the equalizer. Jeremy, thoughts on this game? There might not be a ton, like we kind of said, but you have any thoughts on are they going to be able to translate their recent hockey success to the basketball court?
Yeah, it's same thing. I haven't really watched. I can't say I've watched a lot of Gopher basketball so far, but I did take a look at the schedule, and obviously the first thing that jumps out at you is seeing that recent loss to Northwestern. And even kind of I poked around on the Daily Gopher a little bit today to look into their loss to Wisconsin, where it doesn't look terrible. It was by 10 points, but if you kind of looked over the recap from what they said, it was probably a lot more than 10 points from what Wisconsin should have beat them by a larger amount. So, I used to be more afraid of Minnesota back in the Tubby Smith days. It seemed like he always, especially when you'd play at Minnesota, they'd find a way to kind of look like a 500 team, but always give MSU fits. But yeah, it's I don't see any reason that MSU shouldn't continue their streak of, their winning ways right now. I think the biggest thing is if they keep, obviously, it will be interesting to see that they are so successful on the turnovers. If they do start Yum Nairn, see how he kind of responds to that, because obviously he's done pretty good, I think, at protecting the basketball. But a young freshman against a team that is aggressive like that, I think that'll be one thing to watch. But as long as they obviously have the ball security, I don't see any issue with them winning this game.
Yeah, MSU's given an 82% shot by Ken Palm, 73-64 game. Wouldn't be the first time, nor the second time that MSU is favored by that much and would lose. I think MSU's got a huge streak over Minnesota at Breslin. I'm trying to load the game notes right now to take a look at this. They don't have this. Why don't they have this year's game's game notes up? I believe MSU has won a whole ton of games in a row against Minnesota at Breslin. It's one of the few streaks. It's one of the few Breslin streaks, I believe, that's still alive.
Yeah, that sounds right. It always felt to me under the Tubby Smith era that Minnesota was kind of usually like a poor man's version of MSU. They were kind of, they like to play a little bit up tempo. They usually had pretty good size, but they were never quite built to really beat MSU.
Yeah.
And, I don't have a great sense of how much that's
I'm trying
shifted under Patino, but
trying to load the media guide here to see their series history, but it's not really going. But the next game, by the next time we do a podcast here, they'll have played the Badgers as well. MSU goes to Wisconsin on Sunday, March 1st, given an 18% shot. But the Badgers are coming off a loss, so they are wounded, so to speak. But and that's obviously been a place that forever haunted Izzo until a couple of recent ones there. But this is a game all year long. People have circled as a loss for the Spartans, one that I don't think would be much of a surprise or mean anything to anybody. But KJ, are you looking at this game that way? You just want to see if MSU stays competitive with them?
Yeah, I think that's about the size of it. I mean, I just think the matchup is tough. I have a hard time seeing either Costello or Schilling hanging with Kaminsky for 40 minutes. He had a not great game tonight, and he finished with 18 points and 8 rebounds. And then you look at Sam Decker is a pretty good matchup for Branden Dawson. Obviously, nobody really matches up with Dawson's strength and athleticism, but Decker's in the ballpark.
He's the guy who you look at him, he's got every tool you want if you're an NBA team, but he just doesn't always show it. And then every once or twice a game, he'll do something like, that's it. Now why can't he do that all the time?
Right. He finished the game tonight with 14 points, 9 rebounds, 2 steals, 2 block shots. So you would think he was a dominant force, but it's when you're watching with sort of the eye test, it's a lot streakier than that. It feels like he has those big moments, and then he's kind of disappears or makes some bad plays at other times.
It looks like 15 straight MSU wins over Minnesota at Breslin. Dating back to 97, if I read that quickly and correctly. So, one of those streaks. But, Wisconsin, good team with good players. Trayvon Jackson's still out, but I think in a lot of ways they've actually been a little bit better with him. Was it last year when Trayvon Jackson hit the when Trayvon Jackson hit the almost buzzer beater pretty much, right? After Adrian Payne hit a wild 3 to tie it.
I won't disagree with you.
Am I remembering this correctly? Yeah, I just remember because
right.
I remember I had a whole bunch of stuff going on that day, and I kind of remember that. I think that's how it ended. But Jeremy, thoughts on the Badgers?
Yeah, it's one of those things like, for the last few weeks, it's obviously been one that when you look towards the stretch end, you kind of wrote this off as a loss, and I was kind of hoping for Maryland to win tonight because the one thing to get a team refocused when they're running through a conference is to take a loss. So I think we're going to get Wisconsin's best shot on Sunday, especially after what happened at Maryland tonight. So it's one of those things where you're probably looking to see if they can just stay close, hang into it. I do look for Dawson to have a good game, hopefully, like KJ said, because I do think he can exploit that matchup pretty well. But there's just no answer. I don't think we have an answer for Kaminsky. Especially after when the Illinois game, it was probably one of the worst games for Costello and Schilling that they've had in a little while there. So it's kind of hopefully maybe the game against Minnesota can give me some confidence about them being adequate against Kaminsky. But Wisconsin coming off a loss, playing at home, if you can just stay close, I think that's a moral victory, I guess, as you get towards the stretch run. But it'd be pretty unlikely. I'd be pretty surprised to see us come out with a win at the Kohl Center.
Yeah, heading into this game against Maryland, Wisconsin was sitting number 1 in the country in adjusted. Actually, looks like it's been updated. They were number 1 in adjusted offensive efficiency. Adjusted offensive efficiency, but now they're actually down to number 2 behind Notre Dame after that game. But they were at, I think, 123.5, which would be one of the highest ever in the Ken Palm era, with the highest ever being actually last year's Michigan team. But I think everybody's penciled in a loss here for the Spartans, and it'll just be interesting to see how the matchups work, in that kind of look. So shifting gears, we're going to get into Jeremy's wheelhouse here briefly. Talking about the hockey team, which had 2 games at Wisconsin last weekend. I said they needed to come away with 4 points considering how bad the Badgers have been. They came away with 3. They lost the first game, was it 2-1, 3-2, or something like that?
2-1.
2-1. And but they came back with a 3-0 win on Sunday, pretty dominating fashion. So on one hand, they didn't get 4. On the other hand, they're still right in the thick of that Big Ten race, which has 4 teams kind of all together at the top. But missed opportunity when you look at the shots and stuff on Saturday. But Jeremy, you obviously wrote about it. What were your kind of takeaways from this? From the series, did MSU miss an opportunity?
Yeah, it definitely felt like they missed an opportunity, especially when you look at Friday. It wasn't that Wisconsin really played well or played above punched above their weight for what they've done all year. It was probably the most flat that MSU has looked really since the game that kind of spurned them having this turnaround. Since that 5-0 loss to Minnesota back in December, I haven't seen MSU look just so lethargic and so flat. And Tom and Ash has kind of talked about it when they interviewed him after the game. It's just a young team needs to mature and realize that you're not that far from a Wisconsin team that's only won 3 games. You are having a better season, but you're not a good enough team that you can take Wisconsin lightly on the road and just kind of go through the motions and get a win. So it was pretty disappointing. But I think what happened is they played a great third period. They had 15 shots on net. They just couldn't get that second goal, and that really carried over into Saturday. And Saturday, I know Wisconsin ended up, I think, with more shot attempts than MSU, but that was a big, again, score effects coming into play because Wisconsin had so many shots in the third period because they were down 3-0 and just throwing everything at the net.
Yeah.
So it was a missed opportunity, but at the same time, they got helped out by the league. Ohio State stunned Michigan on Friday, and then Minnesota and Penn State split. So at the end of the weekend, all the teams split with each other, and we're exactly where we were a week ago. So
right, and it's I don't have the standings in front of me. Are Michigan and Minnesota tied at the top, or is it Minnesota followed by Michigan?
Yeah, it's Minnesota and Michigan are tied with 27, and then you have Penn State and Michigan State at 25. The way they have them on the website is MSU ahead of Penn State and Minnesota ahead of Michigan, so I don't know. I assume that means that if that's the way the tiebreakers go.
Yeah, I thought I had heard that Penn State had the tiebreaker over MSU.
Yeah, I think so too because they have more regulation wins, but
right.
The way that they put it on the website has MSU above. So I don't know if the first tiebreaker is the regulation wins or if it's head-to-head, which I know they would beat Penn State on head-to-head, but I think it is regulation wins. So I think if it finished the way it is today, that MSU would technically be 4.
Yeah, and getting that 3 seed would be big for the Big Ten tournament because then you'd open with Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, you would get Wisconsin in the first one, which would definitely be nice. Really, there's not too much of a difference, honestly, between Wisconsin and Ohio State, I think, but Ohio State is actually coming a little more on this year. They got decimated with injuries pretty early on, so you want to at least get to that 3 seed, and it'd be awesome, obviously, to get to the 2nd seed and get a bye because all you have to do then win is 2 games to get to the championship.
Right. That's the thing because the Big Ten's going to be a 1-bid league. Does Minnesota have a chance at large, or do you think they got to win it?
They do. The hard part is that it's just how many losses do they take here at the end.
Right.
If they win, I think if they won all the way out until the championship game, they're projected into the tournament right now as an at-large bid, but because no other team in the league is under consideration, a loss can really drop you. I think Friday night, Michigan went from 16th in the pairwise, which is right on the bubble, and it's kind of the hockey version of the RPI.
Yeah.
And they lost to Ohio State, and they went to 27th, just because Ohio State was so far down in the pairwise. So, yeah, if Minnesota were to lose, their game against Wisconsin or something like that, it might put them right back on the bubble of being in or out. So.
But yeah, I mean the Big Ten tournament's at the Joe, so you got to figure MSU will have a home presence there, and if they were able to get one of those first 2 seeds, you're two wins away from making the tournament, right?
Yep, and I think they're going to have the biggest asset in a 1-game elimination tournament in that Jake Hildebrand has pretty much separated himself as the best goalie in the league. Yeah. Coming into the year, it was really Rumpel and Wilcox were great at Wisconsin and Minnesota, but they've kind of taken a step back, and it's really become that Hildebrand's pretty far and away, I think, by most people's accounts, the best goalie in the league. So give Jake Hildebrand just 2 games to win, and who knows, maybe you can get a championship and get into the tournament. So,
KJ, have you watched any hockey this year?
I have watched both of the first 2 Mighty Ducks movies with my kids this year, which I hadn't seen in a number of years. So that's really refreshed my hockey vocabulary. But this Big Ten tournament sounds like it'll be a pretty exciting deal if it's kind of 6 teams all playing. 6 teams enter and only one can exit.
The issue is this is what the weekend of the first NCAA tournament weekend or the second, right, Jeremy?
Yeah, it was the first one. Yep, and
First,
that's usually the way it fell with the CCHA too.
Yeah,
it
so
always,
so it's
I
tough.
remember State usually had the alumni band for
They
the
had,
CCHA.
they had it in Minnesota last year, and nobody showed up,
Yep.
right? Even from Minnesota. Jeremy, am I recalling correctly?
Yeah, I only really, for sure, yeah, and especially the first game, the first day when it was Ohio State and Michigan State playing in the Penn State-Wisconsin game, or Penn State-Michigan game, rather, it was completely empty, which is really sad because when they used to have the WCHA in Minnesota, I mean, there was 4 schools plus North Dakota, so even when the Gophers weren't really a top team, they would still sell out the Excel. And yeah, it wasn't a good first year for a Big Ten tournament, that's for sure. So I think the Joe will do better, but it rests on Michigan and Michigan State doing pretty good too because they had a good attendance for their one-off game a few weeks back. So.
Yeah, I mean, you've got 2 teams using the 2 teams nearby as opposed to 1 when it was Minnesota, but we'll see what happens. It's unlikely Michigan will be in the NCAA tournament, so maybe they get some hockey fans too. But this weekend they're at Minnesota, right, for 2?
Yep, they actually they're doing a doubleheader, kind of a doubleheader of MSU Minnesota. They're doing a Thursday-Friday series, which I don't know if they have something going on at Mariucci. I know it's not the state high school tournament, but yeah, for some reason they do a Thursday-Friday. Anastas was saying at his press conference today he thinks it's probably a TV thing. I know apparently the Big Ten Network approached the hockey coaches saying they're going to try and do some of these double headers with the basketball leading into the hockey game, which kind of is in a way happened Sunday too with the Ohio State-Michigan basketball game happening right before the Sunday hockey game. So so stick around after the basketball game. They'll play Thursday night after the basketball game on BTN, and then they'll play Friday night. They'll finish the series up.
You giving MSU any chance to come out with a win in the series at all? Do you think? How do you see it playing out?
Well, recent history. I mean, the last 3 series, ever since they've been league partners, MSU has gotten 2 points every time.
Yeah, it's been weird.
They found a way to get a shootout win every time.
Yeah. MSU, even when they were bad, they somehow played well against the Gophers, just well enough to scratch together some points.
Yeah, it'll definitely depend. I think the biggest thing to watch Thursday and Friday is, this year I think State has given up 12 power play goals in 27 or 28 games, but they gave up 5 of those to the Gophers in one weekend. So pretty much outside of that one weekend, they could be the top penalty kill team in the country. So really the big thing that really sunk them from getting a win the first time around was they gave up 2 power play goals the night that they went to a shootout. So the biggest thing is try and stay out of the box, especially when you're playing on Mariucci's, oceanside ice. That's going to be a lot wider. So
yeah, I thought about that when they were at Wisconsin. The MSU has never really played well on the big ice, especially since they lost the skilled players in the late Comley years and early Anastas years. They haven't really had the skilled players to take it. They're more of a muck it up in the corners, low-scoring type of team, and the wide ice has always kind of hurt them. But if they were able, if they come out with 2 points, if they were able to come out with 2 points on the series somehow, I think MSU would be happy with that. Tough place to play. They wrap things up with Wisconsin and Michigan, 3 out of 4 at home, so you'd have a chance to move up there. So that'll probably do it here. KJ, is there anything you wanted to add about anything?
Well, I'll just ramp up the enthusiasm level a little bit for Thursday, just in terms of if MSU gets upset, at that point you're looking at obviously the Wisconsin game, but then Purdue and Indiana to close are both teams that MSU could lose to, and Purdue at home, you would hope the home court advantage helps, but we haven't exactly blown anybody out at home since Indiana. So, I do think the Minnesota game is very important in terms of not so much whether or not we make the tournament, but whether or not MSU's got some momentum going into the tournament. You win that one, then you can afford to just beat one of Purdue and Indiana and feel like you've still had a strong finish to the regular season. If you get upset by Minnesota, then obviously you're probably going to squeak into the tournament and not feel like you got a lot of positive vibes going.
And, I forgot to mention this. You know what else is on the line Thursday? Could switch hands multiple times in one night. It's the Honeycrisp Trophy. I can't believe I forgot. I'm glad I remembered that. Minnesota holds it right now, right? After the most recent hockey win.
Yeah, I was going to say, we always changed around those rules. I know there was a kind of a discrepancy because we didn't hand the shootout win.
No, I counted the shootout win. Was the shootout win the last?
Yeah, so then we would have it because we won Friday.
So MSU has the Honeycrisp. Okay. If you don't know what it is, if you're listening, you don't know what it is. Last year, or maybe the year before, some people at Off Tackle Empire, in association with the Daily Gopher, SB Nation's Minnesota site, decided to put together a trophy for Minnesota MSU games, and they went with the Orange Bowl trophy, but it's full of Honeycrisp apples. It's got a tinfoil hat on there. It's a reference to, I don't even remember who it was, someone on the Off Tackle Empire, an MSU fan, just despised Honeycrisp apples, and I think they come from Minnesota, so that's why it's a Honeycrisp trophy, and it's got the tinfoil hat for all the MSU conspiracies out there. But yes, MSU hockey, in my rules was it changes hands each. We went with hockey, football, men's basketball, and baseball. So it can change hands after any of those. So MSU currently has the trophy after the shootout win over Minnesota on December 6th. So MSU will be defending the trophy in the basketball game, and then it could change hands there, and then it could change hands immediately after with the hockey game. So that is something very important to keep an eye on.
I'm not going to be able to sleep the next 2 nights. Like that.
So it's a big deal. So just remember that. Minnesota was able to get that broken chair trophy thing going with Fo Pelini and Nebraska in football. So I think we can pretend the Honeycrisp trophy is the thing. So that's what I'm going to do. Also, Dan just tweeted that he reran 100,000 simulations with the Maryland win over Wisconsin without a ratings update. MSU's up to about MSU basketball is up to a 1 in 56 chance at sharing the Big Ten title.
Ooh.
So there is a chance. I always forget to say this at the beginning of the podcast, but if make sure you subscribe on iTunes or through the RSS. That way you can get them automatically downloaded. I listen to about 1 billion different wrestling podcasts, and I just get them downloaded to my phone and do that when I'm doing chores around the house. So if you have a podcast app or anything, you can subscribe to The Only Podcast since we've kind of got this going weekly again. Please do that. And keep reading the site. Check out all the stuff we got up there. A lot of good stuff right now. So that's going to do it here. I am Chris Vanini. You can follow me on Twitter at Chris Vanini, along with KJ, who's at KJ at TOC, and Jeremy, who's at Jeremy_Doer, right? That's what it is?
Yep.
Right. So these guys, thanks for listening, and we will talk to you guys next week. See you.